It was in the oceans that life first emerged, and it's here that a wealth of living creatures can still be found. Most familiar are the fish, over 30,000 different species that represent a mere fraction of the total number of ocean dwellers. The rest are largely animals with no backbone, invertebrates, whose soft bodies come in every imaginable size and shape. How can we tease any patterns from this bewildering diversity? Appearances alone can be deceptive. This floating sheet, for instance, is a flatworm, while this is a mollusk, apparently similar but very different inside. Other animals that look drastically different may in fact share a very similar internal structure. This exotic fan belongs to a marine worm that's a relative of this more familiar creature. A closer look at animals, from inside and out, will reveal the pattern behind these puzzles, an underlying set of basic body plans. These semi-transparent drifters, the cone jellies, offer a rare glimpse of internal structure. They contain two body layers separated by a clear jelly-like matrix. Their outer layer, or ectoderm, ripples with fine beating hairs called cilia, used in movement. Only a centimetre across, they share the same body plan as the familiar and often much larger jellyfish. Each jellyfish is like a pulsating bell. On its underside is a mouth, surrounded by tentacles equipped with stinging cells used in the capture of prey. So jellyfish form part of a group called cnidarians, which means sting-bearers. All jellyfish have perfect radial symmetry, with their tissues and organs arranged in a circle. Each species has its own variation on this basic radial pattern. More surprising is that many jellyfish begin their lives as a completely different form. This isn't a plant, but a colony of animals. Each twig bears a flower-like individual called a polyp. This is its mouth, fringed with tentacles. Some polyps give rise to miniature jellyfish that break off and swim away. In body plan, each jellyfish is like an inverted polyp, and many cnidarians pass through both forms during their life cycle. Corals are also polyp colonies. In stony corals, each polyp lays down a skeleton of limestone. This skeleton remains after individual polyps die. Each coral has its own pattern of growth and develops into a distinctive shape. So the cnidarian body plan can give rise to a range of animal forms. Flatworms are built to a very different body design. They are completely symmetrical about the mid-plane of the body. They also have a definite anterior and posterior end. With this bilateral symmetry, the sense organs are concentrated at the anterior end of the animal. They lack a complex circulatory system, but their flattened form keeps all the living tissue near the body surface. Here's another worm with bilateral symmetry, but it displays a new feature, a series of identical body segments. This is characteristic of the so-called segmented worms, or annelids. The worm crawls by deforming each segment in turn through a series of independent but coordinated movements. Annelids range in size from up to 1 meter long to microscopic species such as this, swimming its way between sand grains. But not all annelids pursue a life of active movement. Others are sedentary and filter food from the water. These are the tentacles of a fan worm, which open out and trap drifting particles of food. The tentacles are often the only part of the worm that's visible. The rest remains hidden in a tube of sand grains. Another method of protecting the soft body parts is a hard shell. This is characteristic of mollusks, which include the familiar snails. Encased in its protective shell, a mollusk reveals little of its main features. But in fact, mollusks have a unique body plan. Even the most primitive mollusks have a soft body or visceral mass and a broad muscular foot which is used for movement. The visceral mass includes a simple heart and organs for reproduction and excretion. The nervous system consists of nerve cords and nerve centers or ganglia at the anterior and posterior ends of the animal. Their gut includes both a mouth and an anus. The body is covered by a specialized fold of tissue called the mantle, which often hangs like a skirt over all or part of the body. Within the mantle cavity lies a pair of feathery gills for respiration. The mantle secretes a hard, calcified shell that's characteristic of many animals in this group. Most snails are grazers, feeding on plant material. The rhythmic movement of their rasping tongue, seen here from below, scrapes at algae on rock surfaces. In the sea slugs, as in common garden slugs, both shell and mantle have been greatly reduced, revealing their soft bodies. A cluster of feathery gills is often exposed at the surface. Unprotected by a shell, sea slugs are often poisonous. Their bright warning colors deter potential predators. Slugs creep by waves of contraction in their well-developed foot. In the bivalves, with their paired shells, the foot is used for burrowing. The scallop's foot is greatly reduced, but its shell-closing muscle contracts rapidly enough for the animal to swim. Among the fastest moving mollusks is the squid. At slow speeds, the undulating edge of the mantle propels the animal forward. Contractions of the whole mantle drive the animal backward. Squid have a well-developed head with stout tentacles and large eyes, and are among the most complex of mollusks. Another group of animals contains an array of calcified spines embedded in the body wall. This accounts for their name, echinoderms, which means spiny-skinned. The most familiar member is the starfish. Each arm bears rows of tube feet with a tiny suction pad that attaches onto surfaces. The tube feet are connected with an inner system of water-filled canals running down the length of each arm. The feet are extended by the fluid within them. They can move independently, but under central nervous control. Tube feet are characteristic of all echinoderms. In the sea urchin, they're used both in movement and in feeding. Here they pick up fragments of algae from the surfaces of rock and transfer them to the mouth, which is on the underside of the animal. A distinctive characteristic of starfish and their relatives is their five-fold radial symmetry. This isn't confined to those members of the group which move actively, such as this brittle star. It's also found in members which lead a more sedentary lifestyle. For instance, this red sea cucumber, which filter feeds from the drifting currents. Or this basket star, with its branching arms. Or these feather stars, which cling to the rocks and collect floating particles. Another group of animals displays a hard outer skeleton, elaborately jointed, allowing for movement. Each body segment has a pair of jointed limbs. These are the arthropods, a name which means jointed feet, and the most common aquatic forms include the prawns, shrimps, crabs, and crayfish. The appendages may be modified into fine manipulators, as in this lobster. Or they may be enlarged into feeding pincers, as in this crab. In the barnacle, they perform yet another function. This creature is a remote relative of the crab. Enclosed in a protective covering, it catches drifting particles with greatly modified legs. One problem with having a rigid exoskeleton is that it doesn't expand, so it must be shed if the animal is to grow. Salts from the skeleton are reabsorbed into the bloodstream. Then the animal molts. With its old armor discarded, the prawn is very vulnerable, but its newly secreted exoskeleton gradually hardens. exoskeletons provide support for the body even when the animal leaves water. So many arthropods other than crabs live on land: the insects, spiders, and scorpions. Fish are the dominant creatures of the sea. They come in an immense variety of forms, but they illustrate the basic body plan of all vertebrates. They have an internal backbone that encases the nerve cord and supports the muscles. Their well-developed head includes a large mouth and eyes. Behind the head lie the gills. As well as an internal skeleton, many fish have hard scales on their skin. Banks of muscles attached to the backbone flex the tail from side to side, propelling the animal forward. The bilateral symmetry of fish is found in all vertebrates. Their streamlined form permits rapid movement in the water. Fish breathe by means of gills. Water containing dissolved oxygen enters through the mouth, passes over the gills, and leaves through the gill slits. Although some fish are filter feeders, many possess stout internal jaws armed with teeth. These jaws are found in many vertebrates and enable them to capture large prey. So the diversity of animal life is built on a relatively small number of basic patterns. Some features are unique to a particular group of animals. Others are common to a number of body plans. How can we summarize these differences in body design? First, there's the overall symmetry. Two groups of animals show radial symmetry. These are the echinoderms, such as starfish, and cnidarians, such as jellyfish. The remaining groups of invertebrates all have bilateral symmetry. This includes the flatworms, the roundworms, the mollusks, such as snails, the annelids, and the arthropods, such as crayfish. All vertebrates also show bilateral symmetry. Another important feature is the presence or absence of body segments. Only two major invertebrate groups have segmented bodies. In the annelids, many of the segments may be similar. In the arthropods, the segments have become specialized, and groups of successive segments may form distinct body regions. Yet another aspect is the nature of the body skeleton. Many animals are supported by the hydrostatic pressure of their internal body fluids. But some animals also possess a hard skeleton of some sort to support their tissues. Echinoderms have calcified spines or plates in the body wall. The mollusks have a calcified shell, and it's secreted by the outer layers of the mantle. Arthropods have an exoskeleton, often elaborately jointed, allowing for movement. The vertebrate skeleton, by contrast, is internal and often made of bone. We can also consider similarities in the internal structure of the body. Jellyfish have only two body layers, an outer covering, or ectoderm, and an inner layer, or endoderm, that lines the gut. These are separated by a jelly-like matrix. The gut itself is a sac with a single opening for taking in food and releasing waste. In flatworms, both ectoderm and endoderm are also present. But in addition, there's a middle layer of cells, the mesoderm, from which most of the other tissues are formed. The gut is still sac-like with one opening. All other animal groups have these three distinct body layers. In addition, the gut contains both a mouth and an anus. In starfish, the mouth is more difficult to see because it's actually on the underside of the animal. Finally, there's the arrangement of the nervous system. In some animals, it consists of one or more nerve nets. In many bilaterally symmetrical animals, there's at least one nerve cord along the long axis of the body. A brain or a nerve ring is localized in the head region. The arthropods also have a main nerve cord along the body. But each body segment even has its own nerve supply, a highly efficient system. In vertebrates, there's a well-developed brain and a dorsal nerve cord. So differences in both external features and internal structure form the basis of different body plans. Animals that share the same body plan can be grouped together, forming a powerful method of classification. But this pattern itself throws up a new puzzle. How do animals with different body plans come to share particular features in common? This demands a closer look at the evolutionary history of each group and how different species have adapted to a variety of ways of life. Despite these complexities, there remains a surprisingly economical solution to the problem of animal diversity: a wealth of different forms based on a limited number of relatively simple body designs.